Discover the incredible secrets of Stone Age survival. 10 transformative lessons exposed. Emma stood at the back of her classroom, feeling the weight of history pressing against her with every breath. Her students, bright-eyed but burdened by the same economic struggles that plagued the town, seemed far removed from any idealistic vision of education. The faded walls didn't reverberate with creativity. Instead, they echoed her daily grind lessons, barely sticking while resources dwindled to a trickle, leaving her helpless against the rising tide of expectations. It was suffocating. Was this what she signed up for? A thankless existence where her passion for teaching spiraled into disillusionment? With a deep exhale, she pressed her hand to her chest, grounding herself against the memories of whispered conversations about society's diminishing respect for teachers. As a child, she listened enthralled to her grandfather's tales of adventure, journeys into uncharted territories, charts filled with unyielding landscapes, and the resilience of ancient civilizations. What she wouldn't give for a fraction of the respect he reveled in. But those golden moments had faded into the background as adult life swallowed her whole, a teacher forgotten behind a desk piled high with unyielding paperwork. Emma's heart raced at the idea of unearthing her late grandfather's journals, left untouched for years in the attic. Maybe there were secrets hidden there, relics that could revive her dwindling inspiration. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. In the dusty attic, she stumbled upon the leather-bound journals. As she flipped through the pages, vibrant descriptions of survival and community leaped forth, igniting a flicker of hope amidst her despair. Here lay 10 transformative lessons, principles echoing with relevance even today. Could she breathe life back into these teachings? The thought electrified her, a mission to approach education through storytelling, intertwining her grandfather's philosophies with the stark realities she faced in her own classroom. But doubt hit like a freight train. What if her peers resisted the shift, clinging tightly to the status quo? What was it about her yearning for validation? The incessant need to prove her worth weighed heavy, twisting her stomach into knots. The nagging voices of criticism echoed: the parents, the colleagues, those who questioned her expertise despite her years of devotion. Did they not see the passion that stirred within her? Who was she to challenge established norms? Yet, a dauntless ember ignited with each reading. Perhaps she could craft a workshop, sharing the survival skills her grandfather revered, peeling back layers of apathy that her students wore like armor. But acceptance didn't come without a fight. As she penned the invitation, uncertainty gnawed at her. Was she grasping at straws? Could this be the key to resurgence, or merely a reckless venture doomed to fail? Her heart sank with introspection, already rehearsing how she might present herself to the world. A teacher? Yes, but one braving the harsh reality of this small town's attitudes toward educators. As she prepared for the community gathering, the possibility of unveiling her workshop loomed, anxiety coiled tighter than ever. Just as her resolve began to solidify, a familiar face emerged from the shadows of her past. But what it meant for her future remained agonizingly unclear. Would they embrace her courage, or would their discontent mirror the doubts she harbored? With every eye now fixed upon her, Emma found herself teetering on the precipice of a revelation. Sometimes, what one longs for most is just the will to confront the very doubts that hold them captive. Under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the community hall, Emma could feel the weight of anticipation crushing her spirit. The chairs were filled, their occupants a mix of familiar faces and new ones, each presenting an intimidating embodiment of expectation. This was the moment she had fantasized about for weeks, accompanied by the gnawing dread of what might unfurl. She stood at the podium, clutching her grandfather's journals like a lifeline. Every contour of the leather-bound book brought her back to long-forgotten summers spent listening to tales of bravery and survival. The words "transformative lessons" hummed in her mind, each syllable a chant pushing her toward the edge of vulnerability. She could share those lessons, could instill something monumental in her students, but what if they met her ideas with disdain? The audience stirred, murmurs flitted through the air, and suddenly Emma was forced to confront her fears head-on. What if this effort was met with skepticism? Her palms slick with sweat, she cleared her throat, steeling herself against the echoes of doubt that tightened their coils around her heart. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice reflecting the fragility of her resolve. "Today, we will explore 10 lessons from my grandfather, who taught me that survival isn't just about enduring harsh conditions, it's about community, creativity, and resilience." She delivered her presentation with all the passion she could muster, weaving stories of her grandfather's experiences and how they intertwine with the difficulties her students faced daily. But with each word spoken, she could feel the tug and pull of unyielding skepticism as some faces remained unreadable, arms crossed defensively. "How can ancient lessons help us today?" a man interjected, his tone biting. "This isn't the Stone Age. We need practical solutions, not fables." Emma felt the breath stutter in her chest, doubt threatening to sweep her away. She met the man's gaze, a challenge igniting within her. It was one thing to tell stories. It was another to prove their relevance in modern struggles. "That's precisely what I'm here to explore," she countered, her voice growing steadier with each word. "Survival isn't just about making it through a storm. It's about how we adapt, how we learn to leverage our strengths and work together." As she spoke, she noticed the faces shift from disbelief to curiosity. A light flared in her stomach. Perhaps she wasn't as alone in this journey as she had feared. Could she shift perspectives, nurture growth, using the lessons she held dear? As her fear subsided, a wave of excitement surged within her, fueling her resolve. The gathering evolved into a discussion, ideas surfacing like bubbling springs. Participants began sharing their own experiences of survival, connecting the dots between Emma's teachings and their daily lives. This was more than a workshop. It was a community blossoming under shared understanding. But just as hope nestled within her heart, she caught eyes with the very familiar face she had seen earlier. It was her former mentor, a stern figure from her past who had doubted her every step. Now, standing with arms folded, his shadow loomed larger than any critique from the crowd. Emboldened by the moment, she felt the urge to confront him, to challenge the beliefs that had haunted her since her days in teacher training. Would his presence drive her back into the obscurity of doubt, or would it fuel her resolve to rise above? The air thickened as she approached the point of confrontation. The question burning at the forefront of her mind was this not merely a workshop, but a chance to redefine who she had been and who she could become? The room hushed in anticipation, eyes flickering between the mentor and Emma. The moment of truth stood before her. Would she face the doubts head-on, or would she retreat? With a deep breath, confidence finally buoyed within her. The real challenge was just beginning. Emma took a step forward, the weight of her grandfather's journals feeling like an anchor in her hands. Each breath filled her with a mixture of fear and resolve, a contrasting dance within her core. The stern expression on her mentor's face felt like a challenge etched into time. He had once guided her, but now he stood as a barrier, a reminder of her insecurities. Today, she would have to decide whether to let that past echo silence her or use it as momentum. "Why are you here?" she asked, forcing the words through the gathering tension. Her mentor's brow furrowed slightly, but he crossed his arms tighter, as if retreating into a shell. "To see how far you've come," he replied, his voice tinged with skepticism. "But I'm struggling to see the value in what you've presented." The room shifted, a murmur stirring among the listeners, curiosity rippling through their faces. Emma could feel the energy from her presentation fizzling into a suffocating stillness. Yet, within that stillness, she sensed something vital awakening within her. "I understand your concerns," she said, focusing on the resolute tone she had harnessed during her talk. "But survival isn't about ancient techniques alone. It's about the lessons we draw upon to navigate our modern landscapes. My grandfather's experiences taught him how to adapt, just like I aim to teach my students to adjust to the current challenges they face but also how to thrive in them." The man held her gaze longer than she anticipated, a flicker of respect mingling with the doubt in his eyes. Perhaps he had not expected her to respond with such clarity. Emma's heart raced as she pushed forth, igniting the quiet fire within her. We may live in a different era, yet the essence of resilience remains unchanged. It's about stepping forth, particularly when confronted with adversity. She could see heads nodding around her, the shift in focus evident as intrigue peaked among the audience members. Emma could feel the swell of confidence rising. She was no longer simply repeating tales. She was building connections, bridging the gap between experience and modern survival. And have you considered how many practical skills you can extract from these lessons? Emma continued, aware that this was not just about defending her ideas. It was a chance to demonstrate their relevance. Collaboration fosters innovation. Learning to communicate and support one another creates networks that strengthen every individual's survival chances. Her mentor's brows lifted slightly as she laid out the foundations of her argument. She watched him carefully, gauging the shadows of doubt shifting in his expression. Would he recognize that her passion could spark transformation not only in herself but in her students and the community around them? In that moment, she realized she was not just here to defend her ideas but to assert her growth before those who had defined her doubts. The journey from uncertainty to clarity had transformed her, and with each word, the pieces fell into place. The power of shared knowledge and adaptability rang true for everyone present. The conversation that followed blurred as Emma engaged in dialogue with her peers, their own stories intertwining with lessons learned from her grandfather. She felt invincible, each exchange solidifying her belief that their struggles were woven with the threads of history. Every experience mattered. But when she turned back to her mentor, ready to solidify her newfound confidence, he was already retreating from the group, planting seeds of doubt just by his presence alone. She caught a glimpse of his skepticism, perhaps a habit she had adopted when faced with criticism. Would she allow his retreat to dictate her journey or redefine herself despite it? The moment lay before her. She could either fade back into relying on others' validation or push relentlessly toward owning her voice. The air crackled with tension as she prepared to act. Will you share your insights, or are you merely here to watch? She challenged, every ounce of her resolve cresting toward a breaking point. Emma felt the eyes of the room upon her, anticipating the next chapter of this burgeoning confrontation. Would she break through the shield of her past mentor's doubts and embrace her breakthrough moment? Or would she retreat once again behind the walls of uncertainty? Her heart raced, the path ahead clear yet daunting, and she stood ready, determined to seize the day. The air was charged, the collective anticipation from the audience reverberating through Emma as she locked her eyes onto her mentor, searching for a hint of acknowledgement. The moment stretched, each heartbeat amplifying the question that lay suspended between them. Your silence speaks volumes, she pressed, emboldened by the gradual shift in the room. I'm not asking for your approval out of fear. I'm asserting my growth, and I believe it is time other voices join the conversation. Her mentor shifted, the rigid lines of skepticism slowly softening as surprise flickered across his features. Emma felt a rush of exhilaration at that vulnerable moment. It was as if the scales she had borne for so long were being lifted, suggesting that vulnerability might foster strength instead of defeat. Taking a deep breath, she continued, her voice steady and unwavering. Let us discuss what true survival means. It's not just about surviving the wilderness. It's about navigating the complexities of our society, just as my grandfather once did. It means learning to rely on one another and adapt our skill sets. An audience member near the front, someone who had been visibly skeptical, raised a hand. But how can you tie those lessons to our contemporary challenges? What specifics do you bring? Excellent question, Emma replied, her confidence washing over her like a tide. In a world plagued by isolation and rapid change, the ability to form bonds, share resources, and develop emotional resilience is paramount. Think of the affinity groups my grandfather formed in times of crisis. Those were not simply survival strategies. They were lifelines that empowered entire communities. Voices murmured in agreement, the rhythm of the discussion shifting. Emma's heart surged, dismissing doubts and seizing the dialogue as though it were her stage. She clicked through slides of her grandfather's journals, revealing lessons he had chronicled. They detailed strategies for communicating during emergencies, forming coalitions, and the wisdom gained from collective experiences. Her mentor's posture shifted again, and this time it was subtle yet significant, a lean forward, resting his elbows on the table, suggesting curiosity rather than dismissal. That's all very nice, but it's abstract, he countered, a hint of challenge still lingering in his tone, yet tempered. How would you make it tangible for your students? Emma hesitated for a moment, urgency coursing through her. She had studied this, planned meticulously to address such skepticism, yet now her mind raced to articulate how she could transition these lessons into actionable skills. It's all about practice and application, she responded, her words unraveling like threads woven into a tapestry. For instance, we could hold workshops where participants simulate crises based on real historical events from my grandfather's journals, learning to communicate under pressure, making joint decisions, and reflecting on emotional responses. The nods grew stronger, voices chiming in with ideas, and the atmosphere shifted again from tension to momentum. Emma felt her mentor's gaze soften, the realization dawning that she was not just reciting previous ideas, but weaving a unique narrative of growth, awareness, and modern relevance. Yet, the creeping uncertainty persisted. Her mentor's original skepticism had transformed, but the ghost of his past incredulity lingered. She could sense his struggle to see her as a peer rather than a student in need of guidance. Would he ever relinquish that mantle, stepping aside as she carved her path? This is a substantial shift, he finally said, a weightiness in his voice. But can you sustain it? What comes next if this proves successful? The question hung like a challenge, and Emma felt the gravity of it. She could formulate a grand vision, a program that could embroider the threads of the past into the present, or she could falter under the pressure of expectation. I can, she asserted, determination blooming within as she confronted that uncertainty. Because what I want is not just to teach. I want to evolve this knowledge and integrate it, creating a living repository of experience and adaptability. The finality in her voice imbued her with a fierce clarity, yet it opened a door to a deeper fear lurking within. This was a commitment not just to herself but to those who would follow her, students who might carry her teachings forward. Emma drew a breath, savoring the stillness after her proclamation. The room bathed in contemplative silence. She sensed the potential for transformation in both herself and the audience, but it came with an all-consuming question. Was she ready to claim her rightful place as a leader, aware of the weight of responsibility it entailed? As she mulled over the possibilities, her mentor contemplated her words. Would he finally choose to acknowledge her as an equal? Would he become her ally rather than her critic? The juncture before her felt electrifying, trembling with unseen potential. The waves of uncertainty crested around her once more, and Emma realized she stood not just on the precipice of her journey, but at the beginning of an unexpected alliance, or perhaps an even greater conflict. What would her mentor choose in that pivotal moment? Would he stand as an ally, or would the long-standing shadows of doubt drag her towards stagnation again? Emma felt her heart race once more, ready for the unfolding of the next decisive chapter. Emma sensed the weight of her mentor's gaze, feeling it press upon her as though the air had thickened with expectation. The pause stretched longer than she wanted, morphing into an almost palpable entity, a test of wills woven into the very fabric of their interaction. She could see the flicker of doubt still dancing in his eyes, heavy with his expectations for her, an expectation that had been the very essence of her past struggles, and now promised a potential resurgence. Your resolve is admirable, but ambition alone isn't enough, he stated, finally breaking the tense silence. His voice a low rumble, thick with the gravitas that had often influenced her path. How do you plan to navigate the inevitable setbacks if the response to your ideas isn't what you anticipate? Leadership demands resilience, and the capacity to adapt when the situation inevitably veers off course. Her heart raced at the implications. The challenge wasn't only about proving her ideas but about facing criticism and setbacks with an unwavering spirit. Emma felt a surge of emotions, anxiety coiling tightly in her chest while simultaneously igniting a flame of determination. This was where the real test lay. "I understand what you're saying," she replied, her tone firm as she carefully selected her words. "It's about constructing a framework that is adaptable, rooted in feedback and revision. Just as my grandfather's teachings were informed by experience, my approach will be fluid, evolving with the input of those involved students, peers, and even critics." "Interesting," he said, a hint of intrigue lighting up his features again. "But can you handle the turbulence that comes with such fluidity? A leader isn't just expected to be innovative. They're also judged for their control during unpredictable moments." Emma leaned in, eager to embrace the challenge head-on. A vivid memory flickered in her mind, hours spent sorting through her grandfather's journals. The entries detailing not just survival tactics but also the failures, the moments of desperation that were just as instructive as the victories. "The key is to embrace vulnerability, to accept that failure is a teacher," she articulated, drawing from the depths of her understanding. "My grandfather's greatest lessons came from his missteps. We can purposely design encounters that allow for trial and error. By embracing a culture of experimentation in the workshops, we equip participants to confront their own limitations." Her assurance felt like an anchor amidst the uncertainty swirling in her mind. Perhaps this was not just a test of her ideas but also of her commitment to transform through resilience. The moment stretched again, but this time, Emma felt the intensity reflect her evolving understanding. She was not just defending her vision. She was forging it with every exchange and challenge thrown her way. Conversing with him felt like peeling back the layers of her own defenses, revealing both her strengths and vulnerabilities. Each point that sprang forth clenched the indecision that had gripped her for so long. This was her opportunity to redefine not only how she saw herself but how she allowed others to perceive her. "I want it to be a shared journey," she declared, her voice steady, "one where trust and transparency are central. If disaster strikes, we adapt together, drawing on the strength of our collective experiences." A stirring in the room signaled that her audience had caught on to her exhilaration, reactions echoing her potential growth. Yet, her mentor's expression remained unreadable. He was reaching back into the corners of his own experience now. Did he see a protégé worth endorsing? Or was he wrestling with the shadows of doubt that once clouded his judgment? "Very well," he finally said, nodding slowly, though caution still flickered in his eyes. "But know that this challenge will require more than just enthusiasm. Your resolve will be tested by students, colleagues, and perhaps the greater narrative of what you're stepping into. Are you prepared for the reality of that?" Emma felt the pulse of determination in her veins, invigorated by the weight of his challenge. She wanted to reject any notion of backing down. "I am," she replied without hesitation, even as a flicker of apprehension tried to creep in. As she grasped the gravity of her commitment, the path ahead emerged clearer, but still veiled in uncertainty. She had opened a dialogue with her mentor. Now came the real test of whether she could fuse her passion, her grandfather's legacy, and her transformative vision into a coherent movement. What would the next phase entail? Would her unwavering stance ultimately persuade him to become an ally in her journey? Or would her confidence falter beneath the weight of new expectations? Emma stood on the precipice of defining leadership in her own terms, yet a spark of doubt ignited once more. The reality of leadership approached quickly, and she understood that the true challenge lay not only in the idea but in execution. With that realization dawned a new question. Would she have the courage to navigate the complexities of uncertainty in the coming trials? Or would her ambition crumble under the weight of self-doubt when faced with the harshness of reality? The following days unfolded like a labyrinth, each turn promising both obstacles and new insights that shifted the paradigm of Emma's leadership journey. The air was thick with anticipation as she prepared for her first workshop, her mind initially clouded with uncertainty. She was keenly aware of her mentor's words still echoing in her ears, a blend of challenge and encouragement that served as a catalyst for her resolve. Emma understood that the workshop would be her proving ground, an arena where the seeds of her ideas would flourish or face the harshness of scrutiny. In the hushed corners of her apartment, she meticulously curated the agenda. Each item was crafted to foster engagement and rapport among the participants. Her vision took shape through collaboration, inviting everyone to co-create an environment of shared learning. Yet, dread loomed at the back of her mind. Would the reality of execution match her aspirations? As she sat at her desk, clutching the calloused pages of her grandfather's journals, she was reminded of his unyielding belief in authenticity. She recalled a passage where he wrote about the necessity of preparing for failure, how each miscalculation could spark unparalleled insight if approached with an open mind. That wasn't just theory. It was the standard he set for himself, and now she felt that same responsibility weighing on her. The day of the workshop arrived, her heart drumming a steady rhythm of excitement and anxiety. Emma stepped into the room, a mix of bright eyes and skeptical expressions greeting her. She noticed a few participants whispering to each other, their body language conveying both interest and caution. The moment felt pivotal. Any misstep could tip the delicate balance she was striving to create. "Let us begin with vulnerability today," she stated, her voice emerging with unexpected steadiness. "I want each of you to share a personal setback you've faced. This is our first step toward building a community where we can learn from each other." The room fell into a heavy silence. Emma's heart raced, every fleeting moment intensifying her self-doubt. She had opened the floor to emotions that could either foster connection or alienate her audience. After an uncomfortable pause, a participant finally spoke up, sharing a story of failure intertwined with hope. Gradually, others began to follow suit, revealing their struggles and aspirations. Emma's strategy seemed to unfurl like a flower in bloom, exhibiting its raw beauty despite initial hesitance. As the sharing continued, Emma found herself navigating the conversation, drawing insights from her own experiences and weaving them into an inclusive narrative. With every confession and every shared struggle, she felt her confidence building. Perhaps she wasn't alone in her discomfort. Learning from each other, especially about our failures, sets the stage for excellence, she declared, her conviction rising with each word. "Let us redefine what success looks like, not as a solitary victory but as a journey shaped by our collective experiences." Yet, beneath this newfound composure, a nagging thought chiseled away at her resolve. Was she truly prepared for the feedback and criticism that loomed just ahead? Would her attempts to create an environment of openness expose her to even harsher judgment? As the workshop transitioned from theory to practice, Emma introduced a group activity centered on collaborative problem-solving. When unexpected hurdles emerged, she encouraged a flexing of their approaches to adapt in real time. She witnessed participants flourishing, ideating solutions with a vigor that invigorated her spirit. But just as her confidence was buoyed, one participant raised a hand, skepticism etched across his face. What happens if someone fails? What if we're too vulnerable and it backfires? His question pierced the air like ice, leaving her momentarily stunned. She instinctively felt her heart race, a stark reminder of her mentor's warning. Yet, at that moment, a realization washed over her, a different kind of vulnerability. The ability to face criticism while remaining steadfast in her commitment to transformation. "Failure is part of the process," she responded, meeting his gaze with newfound determination. "Each misstep teaches us resilience. If we can't embrace our fears, then our growth is stunted. Success is not merely a final outcome but a continuous journey of learning." As the room erupted in a mix of agreement and doubt, Emma recognized that she had opened a door into the complexities of leadership. She felt a pulse of exhilaration, knowing that she needed to navigate a landscape littered with resistance, and that every challenge would become a stepping stone. Her commitment to the journey had only just begun, and as she glanced around the room brimming with raw potential, she understood that the scars of doubt would remain. They would accompany her moving forward, but they would also shape her into a leader capable of weathering storms. Yet, amid this fresh energy, a new question hung in the air. How would she confront the challenge of not merely leading, but inspiring others to embrace their vulnerabilities, when her own confidence still felt like a fragile construct waiting to be tested? Would her initial strides be enough to fortify her growing vision, or would the voices of doubt creep in, threatening to unravel her progress? Emma sensed a shift in the dynamics of the workshop. The energy, once tenuous, crackled with a newfound camaraderie among participants. But beneath this positive atmosphere, a deeper tension lurked: her own apprehensions about sustaining this momentum. Each interaction reiterated a truth she had come to realize. Vulnerability was not merely an act but a commitment, an ongoing practice that required both courage and humility. As the workshop progressed, Emma introduced a segment focused on goal setting. The group would not only reflect on their vulnerabilities but also translate those insights into actionable plans to overcome challenges. She believed this was essential. Introspection without direction was akin to navigating a ship without a compass. "Let's create a personal roadmap," she announced, her voice steady yet revealing a flicker of uncertainty. "Identify one challenge you aspire to tackle and articulate the first 3 steps you can take." She moved among the tables, offering encouragement and answering questions. But as she listened to others voice their fears and hopes, Emma felt her own voice internally questioning her authority. What expertise did she truly possess to guide them? Their vulnerabilities were raw, and she couldn't help but wonder if she could lead them effectively without revealing her own shaky path. As participants engaged in brainstorming, one woman's comment caught her attention. "Scary to commit to change. What if I fail in front of everyone?" The vulnerability in her voice resonated with Emma's internal conflict. The fear of judgment, the anxiety of revealing weaknesses, wasn't that the same trepidation she felt? In that moment, Emma recalled her grandfather's words about learning from failure, and she decided to take a leap. "I'll go first," she said, surprising even herself. "I fear that my confidence might falter, especially when I'm expected to lead. But I'm committed to trying. My first step is to be honest about my challenges with you all." A ripple of surprise coursed through the group. In sharing her fear, she inadvertently shifted the focus back to the essence of vulnerability. Suddenly, she wasn't standing above them as a figure of authority. She was walking alongside them on this journey. Conversations bubbled back to life, each participant opening up about their fears, their hopes, and the very real possibility of failure. As Emma facilitated this evolution, she was astonished by the transformation in the room. Doubts began to morph into actionable insights, each story renowned for its authenticity. Their collective energy emboldened her, pushing aside the flickering insecurities that had haunted her earlier. But just as her confidence surged, a thundercloud darkened her thoughts. What if their progress was merely an illusion? What if, at the first hint of real adversity, the participants' vulnerabilities would become impassable barriers instead? She quaked at the possibility that the very openness she encouraged could crumble at the weight of external judgment. In choosing to reveal her vulnerability, Emma had unearthed a treasure trove of resilience within herself. She realized that it was okay to be a work in progress and that every leader wrestles with fear. Embracing this truth, she redirected the focus back to the participants' plans, thanking them for creating an environment that mirrored her own journey. As the session concluded, Emma surveyed the roomful of engaged minds and hopeful hearts, a vibrant contrast to the before the barriers of judgment now crumbled. Yet, deep inside, a realization gnawed at her. She had invited them to be brave, but could she maintain this atmosphere of trust when the inevitable challenges appeared? With the closing remarks still echoing, Emma found herself grappling with a compelling dilemma. Could she balance authenticity while striving for personal triumph? What would happen when the real tests would come, pushing her to the brink? The next chapter of her journey was uncertain, but she felt determined to embrace every twist and turn it would unfold. The pressing question remained: how would she cultivate an enduring sense of vulnerability and growth amidst the very real fear of failure waiting on the horizon? The day after the workshop ended, Emma woke with a knot in her stomach. The triumph she felt the night before now seemed distant, replaced by an overwhelming wave of self-doubt. Her thoughts spiraled around the participants' hopeful ambitions, unraveling the thread she had carefully woven amongst themselves, threatening to fray in the face of reality. Had she truly equipped them to face the world outside? Or had she simply offered a temporary reprieve from their fears? She settled at her kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm coffee cooling beside her, as she scribbled down the goals and plans the participants had shared. It was an attempt to latch onto that surge of energy once more. Yet, as she organized the notes, shadows of apprehension slipped through her confidence like water through her fingers. She wondered, what if she failed to provide them with lasting strategies? What if their vulnerabilities collided with the harshness of the real world and ruined the moment she had fostered? Determined to confront these anxieties, Emma picked up her phone and began to compose an email. She needed to connect with her participants again, to remind them and herself that their journeys weren't defined by isolated events. Yet hesitation gnawed at her. Who was she to guide their growth when she felt so unsure of her own? After several drafts, Emma finally pressed send. In her message, she encouraged openness and continued dialogue about their struggles. It felt small but was undeniably important. She'd learned that leadership did not rely solely on proficiency but fundamentally on connection and shared humanity. In the days following, Emma began to receive replies. Their words were raw and honest, a reminder that vulnerability, once shared, did not vanish. It deepened the relationships they had begun. One participant, Mia, wrote about a constructive, albeit challenging, conversation she had initiated with her boss. Another shared her terrifying but exhilarating jump into a new career path. As she read their stories, a sense of hope blossomed within her. These connections, these stories of courage, were not just victories against fear, they were validation of the space they had created together. Yet, beneath the sense of camaraderie, Emma wrestled with a persistent question. How could she remain authentic in her own journey when she felt unqualified? While the participants were embracing their challenges, she found herself skirting the edges of her own. It became evident that she would need to put her newfound philosophy of vulnerability into practice beyond the workshop walls. Feeling an unexpected surge of determination, Emma decided to confront another layer of her own professional growth. She enrolled in a series of leadership training courses, seeking skills to bolster her confidence. Each step felt like stepping onto a tightrope, balancing between the desire to expose her weaknesses and the fear of judgment she still struggled with. At her first class, Emma sat in the back, observing the dynamics, power gestures, assured voices, strategies laid bare. The urge to retreat back into her shell bubbled within, yet she resisted. The instructor encouraged active participation, demanding that attendees share their leadership philosophies. Remembering her experience with the workshop, Emma forced herself to raise her hand, revealing her insecurities to the group. Just as she felt the adrenaline subside, the instructor caught her eye and guided her into a direct discussion about vulnerability in leadership. Emma's discomfort morphed into a realization. Her past workshop was not an isolated triumph. It was a beginning, a doorway to something larger than herself. As the class progressed, she discovered her approach had resonance beyond her expectations. By embracing her vulnerabilities, she ignited conversations among her peers, creating an atmosphere where authenticity flourished. However, with every word she shared and every obstacle she faced, the gnawing thought persisted: how long could she maintain this facade of confidence while feeling so far from it? The stability of her recent connections felt precarious, threatening to collapse under the weight of her own unresolved struggles. Emma stood at a crossroads, with every step she took potentially compromising her carefully constructed self-image. Each encounter became a testament to her determination to grow, yet she reckoned with the uncertainty lurking in the shadows. Would she falter when it mattered most? The next phase of her growth was looming, filled with tantalizing challenges and daunting fears. Facing her competing desires for authenticity and perceived competence, she felt the walls closing in. How could she embrace the demanding path ahead while confronting the perilous fear of failure that overshadowed her every move? The following week, Emma found herself hesitating at the threshold of her next leadership training session. The thrill of vulnerability she had embraced in previous classes morphed into a tangible sense of obligation. Now, she no longer wanted to simply demonstrate strength, she needed to harness it. Armed with a simile she kept repeating to herself, she stepped into the classroom, determined to transform perceived fragility into enduring resilience. As she settled into her seat, the instructor introduced a periodic exercise centered on conflict resolution, a subject that resonated uncomfortably within her. It was one thing to share personal stories of vulnerability, another entirely to face what had long been her own unresolved conflicts, notably with her past employer, the harshest critic of her potential. The instructor posed a hypothetical, multifaceted conflict scenario, encouraging each participant to draw from their personal experiences. Emma felt the weight of the room's collective focus shift toward her as if she were a spotlight's target. With a deep breath, she pushed back her fear of judgment and articulated a recent workplace challenge. She had encountered a project derailed by a lack of clarity and communication. In narrating her experiences, she discovered the complexity of her emotions. There was not only frustration but also a hint of regret. Why had she not advocated stronger for her ideas? Emma wrestled with the memory of repeatedly deferring in meetings, yielding to more assertive voices. Her candid exploration prompted an unexpected surge of discourse. Her classmates responded with insights that made her feel less isolated. Watching others grapple with similar situations, Emma realized this experience would be a catalyst for her growth. They shared tools they had learned along the way, strategies for turning tension into productive dialogue. Each interaction seeped into Emma's consciousness, shaping her approach. While still grappling with lingering self-doubt, she felt a burgeoning sense of clarity about her role. Emma began to conceive leadership not just as a function of personal prowess, but as an adjudicating force within conflicting narratives where both strength and vulnerability interplayed. Gradually, the fog of self-doubt began to clear. What she once perceived as a weakness, her tendency to hesitate, transformed into an opportunity for self-reflection. By the end of the class, the instructor assigned participants to form pairs for a follow-up activity, a role-play to negotiate complex scenarios based on their real-life experiences. Emma's initial instinct to shy away ignited a flicker of determination instead. She approached Mia, encouraging her to tackle conflicting interests productively, drawing on the ethos of the workshop they shared. Thus began an intricate dance of negotiation, where each participant adjusted dynamically according to the other's responses. The simulation heightened Emma's awareness of her own negotiating skills. She learned to listen intently, allowing openings for compromise and creativity. With each interaction, the tumult of fear dulled, leaving a clear vision of her capabilities. Yet, amidst this liberating experience, an unsettling thought remained locked in her mind. Was she merely addressing symptoms of her conflict rather than its root causes? The gravity of her unresolved fears gnawed at her, questioning whether her newfound skills in negotiation could truly rectify the internal struggle she felt regarding her worthiness as a leader. As the session concluded, Emma felt an ambivalence. She couldn't shake the exhilaration of newfound competence, was tinged with a pressing need to confront her deepest insecurities. The desire to tackle her past employers loomed like a thundercloud in her mind. Would she have the courage to engage with them again, armed with her insights and newfound assertiveness? That evening, Emma's decision crystallized. It was time to confront not just her peers but the architects of her self-doubt. She looked out the window, understanding that this impending confrontation would redefine her path, a leap that could either seal her newly cultivated confidence or fracture it entirely. How could she harness the lessons learned in class to address the roots of her conflict? Tomorrow, she resolved, would mark the beginning of a critical chapter in her journey, one that could either liberate or entrap her. The uncertainty ahead held an unmistakable pull that both exhilarated and terrified her. Emma was staring directly into the abyss of her former self, armed with nothing but her resolve. Underneath the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the air thickened with tension and expectation as Emma stepped into the conference room where her former employer awaited. The path she had traversed was littered with both triumphs and lingering fears. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest. Yet with each heartbeat, the resolve to confront her past fortified her spirit. Today was not merely a meeting, it was the reckoning of her journey toward authenticity. As she settled into her chair, Emma recalled the countless hours spent wrestling with her self-doubt. No longer would she allow past criticism to cloud her vision. Today, She would embrace the lessons of resilience forged through trials both in her workshop and her recent leadership training. Each lesson had primed her for this confrontation, empowering her to stand firm in her truth. As the conversation unfolded, she felt the push and pull of old narratives, familiar voices threatening to drown her newfound strength. Her former boss, seated across the table, exuded the same critical air, reminding Emma of why she had become mired in self-doubt. But this time she would not falter. She recognized that her worth was not tethered to his approval. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, steadying her voice as she laid out her concerns over the previous project's failures. The tension in her shoulders slowly melted as she articulated her experiences, the miscommunications, unmet expectations, shared regrets. This was not simply a search for validation. It was a declaration of her own evolution. As their discussion morphed into a dialogue, Emma felt herself stepping into her power. She asserted that leadership demanded the capacity to listen, learn, and adapt, principles that resonated deeply with the ethos she had cultivated through her workshop initiatives. No longer apologizing for her perspectives, she embraced her contributions with unyielding clarity. "I believe we could have navigated the project with more transparency," she stated, emphasizing that survival in the modern landscape required collaboration over competition. Her former employer's brows furrowed, but as Emma continued to elucidate her points with conviction rooted in her recent learnings, she noticed cracks in the facade of his skepticism. "I've been incorporating feedback into my practice," she stated, recalling the experience of openness she fostered with her participants. "It creates an environment where everyone can contribute their strengths to overcome challenges." Each assertion dismantled layers of doubt she once allowed to govern her interactions. The more she unraveled her thoughts, the more control she gained. The once daunting mere presence of her past employer no longer held power over her. A shift occurred. He leaned forward, interest peaked. "These are valid points, Emma. But what do you intend to do differently moving forward?" The question hung in the air, her heart thrumming with uncertainty. This was her moment, a chance to not only define her leadership style but to reinforce her commitment to authenticity. "I'm focusing on creating a culture of learning, where vulnerability is embraced and growth is collectively celebrated," Emma replied, her confidence buoyed by the myriad stories and experiences shared with her workshop participants. "Just like in our discussions the other day, where we transformed anxieties into actionable plans, I see the value in continuous dialogue and shared responsibility." As clarity settled within her, they delved into specific strategies for approaching the challenges that previously left her feeling ineffective. Their conversation could have spiraled into yet another confrontation, but instead, it forged an unexpected alliance of respect. As dialogue flowed, Emma realized her past experiences had now equipped her with insight that illuminated paths of collaboration rather than confrontation. By the end of the session, her former employer expressed a desire to brainstorm initiatives centered around the principles they had discussed. Emma felt reinvigorated, no longer tethered by the shadows of her past. Instead, she faced the future ready to embrace conceiving innovative strategies, applying insights she had cultivated. Later that evening, a wave of catharsis washed over her as she reflected on her day's victories. A newfound sense of solid confidence settled within, dispelling the lingering uncertainties that had once plagued her endeavors. She had proven to herself that she could traverse conflict, not just with sheer will but with insight and communal growth. Emma began drafting an email to her workshop participants, eager to share her experience and reaffirm the power of their collective journey. "I faced my fears today, and it was transformative," she wrote, articulating the evolution she had welcomed in both herself and the conversations taking shape. Investing in authenticity and transparency can radically alter how we engage with one another and build our futures. As Emma pressed send, she glanced at her grandfather's journals, the dusty pages now luminous with revived dreams. The tumultuous journey had ignited within her a burning desire for growth, and the resolve to pursue her passion as an educator shone brightly. She acknowledged the challenges that lay ahead, but now they would be met not with fear, but fortified determination to embrace every moment of her journey. No longer feeling like an afterthought in her own life, Emma had completed her evolution, a teacher who passionately fostered growth in herself and those around her. She stood ready to confront any obstacle, not as a lingering remnant of doubt, but as an assertive leader, ready to transform futures. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe now to our channel to catch more exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach even more people who might need encouragement in their journeys. Comment below your reactions to Emma's journey and share your insights on overcoming personal fears. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who could benefit from this powerful conclusion. Let's spread these transformative narratives.